The story of a president who changes his stance on providing weapons to Ukraine begins not with a single decision, but with a gradual, unsettling realization that grows within him over time. This is a tale of a leader confronted with the stark consequences of his actions. A man who slowly comes to see the broader picture of global events and the interconnectedness of seemingly unrelated incidents. It is a story of doubt, moral awakening, and a deep dive into the possibility of an orchestrated reality. The president's decision For months, the president had been resolute in his support for Ukraine. He had stood before the nation, assuring them that the weapons they were sending would help a beleaguered country defend its sovereignty against a powerful aggressor. The decision was popular. It was seen as an act of justice, a show of solidarity with a democratic ally. However, as the war dragged on and the death toll rose, the president found himself plagued by a growing sense of unease. He watched as images of devastated cities and grieving families filled the news. Reports of civilian casualties, of lives destroyed, and of communities torn apart became harder to ignore. The moral clarity with which he had once viewed the conflict began to blur. The unexpected descent It was during a late-night meeting with his closest advisors that the first crack in his resolve appeared. One of his oldest and most trusted advisors, a man who had always been a hawk on foreign policy, expressed doubts. "Mr. President," the advisor began cautiously, "I think we need to reassess our strategy. The weapons we're sending, they're not just prolonging the conflict, they're escalating it. The more we send, the more both sides double down. And meanwhile, innocent people are caught in the crossfire." The president was taken aback. He had never heard this advisor speak with anything less than absolute confidence in their approach. But now, there was hesitation, even fear, in his voice. The gradual unraveling The advisor's words triggered something in the president. He began to question the narrative he had accepted so easily. He ordered a classified review of the intelligence, looking not just at the military situation in Ukraine but at the broader geopolitical landscape. As the reports came in, the president was struck by a series of troubling patterns. The riots in England, the unrest in other parts of Europe, and even the escalating tensions in the Middle East, they all seemed connected. Part of a larger wave of instability that was sweeping across the globe. But what was causing it? The president became obsessed with this question. He spent sleepless nights poring over intelligence reports, reading analysis after analysis. And slowly, a picture began to emerge, a picture that terrified him. The hypothesis The president began to consider the possibility that the events unfolding around the world were not a series of isolated incidents, but part of a coordinated effort to destabilize the international order. He hypothesized that there were powerful forces at work, manipulating events from behind the scenes, creating chaos to serve their own ends. Perhaps it was a global cabal of oligarchs, seeking to weaken nation-states and create a world where they could rule without challenge. Or maybe it was a rogue faction within the intelligence community, using conflict and unrest to expand their power. The president wasn't sure who was behind it. But the pattern was too clear to ignore. The riots in England, for example, had initially been dismissed as spontaneous outbursts of anger over economic inequality and police brutality. But the president began to see them as part of a larger strategy to destabilize the country, to weaken its government and sow division among its people. Similar patterns emerged in other countries. In France, in Germany, In the United States itself, wherever there was unrest, the president saw the same invisible hand at work, pushing societies to the brink of collapse. The moral dilemma *. With this new understanding, the president faced a profound moral dilemma. If his hypothesis was correct, then continuing to send weapons to Ukraine was not just an act of support for an ally, it was playing into the hands of those who sought to destabilize the world. But how could he stop? If he pulled back now, he would be seen as weak, as abandoning a friend in need. Worse, he feared that the conflict would spiral even further out of control without the support of the international community. Yet the alternative, continuing to fuel a war that was causing so much suffering and possibly feeding into a larger, darker agenda, seemed equally unacceptable. The decision to change course *. After weeks of agonizing over the decision, the president called another meeting with his advisors. This time, he was the one who expressed doubts. "I've been thinking," he began, "about the bigger picture. About what's really going on here. I can't shake the feeling that we're being manipulated, that this conflict, and others like it, are being used to serve someone else's agenda. I'm starting to believe that by continuing to send weapons, we're not just supporting Ukraine, we're feeding into a cycle of chaos that could consume us all." The room fell silent. His advisors looked at him, some with understanding, others with shock. One by one, they voiced their opinions, but the president's mind was already made up. He announced his decision to the world the next day. The United States would cease sending weapons to Ukraine and instead focus on diplomatic efforts to bring about a ceasefire and negotiate a lasting peace. He called on other nations to do the same, urging them to look beyond the immediate conflict and consider the broader implications of their actions. The aftermath *. The decision was met with fierce criticism, both at home and abroad. Some called the president a coward, others accused him of abandoning Ukraine to its fate. But there were also voices of support from those who shared his growing concerns about the true nature of the conflict and the forces behind it. The war in Ukraine eventually ground to a halt, not because of a decisive military victory, but because both sides were exhausted, and the international community finally rallied around a diplomatic solution. The president's decision was seen by some as a turning point, a moment when the world stepped back from the brink of a broader catastrophe. But the president remained haunted by the questions that had driven him to change course. He never found definitive proof of the conspiracy he suspected, but he couldn't shake the feeling that he had glimpsed the outlines of a shadowy network, pulling the strings of global events. In the years that followed, the president continued to speak out against what he saw as the dangers of an unchecked global elite, warning that the true battle was not between nations, but between the powerful and the powerless. His words resonated with many, and a movement began to grow. A movement dedicated to exposing the hidden forces that shaped the world and to building a more just and transparent global order. The president's change of heart may have altered the course of a single conflict, but it also sparked a broader awakening. A recognition that in a world where information and power are so easily manipulated, the truth is more elusive, and more precious, than ever. This story, while fictional, touches on real concerns and anxieties about the complexities of global politics, the hidden influences that can drive conflict, and the moral dilemmas faced by those in power. Whether or not such a conspiracy exists, the story serves as a reminder of the importance of vigilance, critical thinking, and the courage to question even the most deeply held beliefs.